Many of you have asked me about my story and the setbacks aside from autoimmune. I have told you guys many times that autoimmune was not my biggest setback. For many of the people I've worked with, it is, and they don't know what they would do without the support of their friends and family. I didn't have any of that, unfortunately. I was born with epilepsy, and I was born in a family of the worst dynamics you can possibly think of. Father who was always busy, mother who had mental illness, she had schizophrenia and psychosis, and I was forced to grow up early, and I didn't know what was going on when I had 4 to 5 seizures a day. My mom at the time removed my tonsils, which removed the first gland of defense. And so that just opened the doors for me to get sick with anything was ingested in my body. And thereafter, I was on anti-seizure medication. I constantly got infections. I constantly lived in a very sick state for my young years. I was held back in kindergarten, and then even further, I had learning disabilities. And I didn't know why. I could not pay attention. I couldn't focus as a child. And these conditions completely debilitate you and create cytokine storms in your body for you to not be able to fight off the infections, the viruses, the bacteria. So you have to manually do it. And this is something I learned later in life. And as I went on in life, my family was completely dysfunctional. I basically didn't have a mom because she was mentally just too far gone. My dad was always working, expected a lot, even from me. And as they saw that I wasn't performing, they saw that, oh, this person is lazy. And my sister was the golden child. And I grew up in this dynamic of being the scapegoat child, just because of this illness. And they didn't give me a break. They disinherited me at a very young age, and I was forced to live a life on my own. I was forced to find ways and had to grow up on my own, and luckily I was able to find people to help me along the way. As I grew up further, I got into being anorexic because I was constantly bullied when I went to school. Bullied by people who had no idea, and I couldn't believe that someone with such a big heart could be called ugly down the halls, could be made fun of for their appearance. And I just thought, how could the world be so shallow in this way that they don't value people who have such big hearts? And then when I went home, my father would be overly critical of me and told me I needed to lose weight and told me I needed to look a certain way and I wasn't going to get married and so forth. And growing up in that dynamic created anorexia. And then I just thought, if I couldn't get peace anywhere and I couldn't control anything that was going on around me externally, the one thing I could control was my weight. And I took that ball and I ran with it to the point where I was completely depleted, nearly 70 pounds. And then, I came to a point where I ran into a personal trainer at the gym, and she saw me at 70 pounds and she said, "You don't need to work out. You need food." And she brought vitality back into my life. And I started to meet with her. I felt so alone. I felt misguided in life. And she kind of took me into her arms and helped me for a few months. And then one day I was on her couch at the age of 18 and I completely passed out. I was unconscious. She called my father at that time. He said he didn't care. He was out on a business trip and to call 911. Instead, she took me in her arms, took me to a state-of-the-art hospital, fought doctors to get 12 of them to figure out what I had, and it was a rare disease. That was also an autoimmune, called autoimmune hemolytic anemia. And again, I was bedridden, hospitalized for 3 months on high doses of prednisone. And I finally understood what autoimmune was. When I had epilepsy, no one saw that as an autoimmune, and they just let that slide by. But with this, they were able to find I had autoimmune, and that's when I understood why I was always bedridden. Why was I always sick or vomiting or passing out? I remember I went camping in the desert with a social group, and I had passed out completely. And I had a lot of vertigo symptoms. I had many different symptoms, and I was always having this anxiety with autoimmune of like, what if something happened to me? What if I'm alone and something happens to me because of my unpredictable health and immunity? And as I grew older, I had Hashimoto's, lupus, I had alopecia, IBS-C, and then I just started to go to every single medical conference out there. I started reading medical research. I started to work really hard in my career, and I remember I was basically outworking everyone out there. And once I overcame the autoimmune hemolytic anemia, I was accepted to UCSD. And when I started going to school there, I was working on their job portal, and I found a job that was right for me. And I basically applied to the job, and you don't want to miss out on what happens next. I will share with you soon in part 2.